If you're a new player to Classic, there's likely a few things you want to know when getting started. Now, probably the most common question that I get is, what deck should I play if I'm new to the mode? If you're completely new to the mode, or the game even, my first suggestion is Zoo Warlock. Now, a lot of people aren't going to like this because they don't like playing against the deck. But it's the cheapest competitive deck you're going to get. You'll see there's like no epics, anything like that. It's just commons and rares. Very easy to craft. It's easy to play as well. For the most part, you're just spilling out whatever minions you can for however much mana you've got. You've got endless draw in the deck, and you're just going to fight for the board. You're going to try to maintain board control with these amazing board control minions. And then once you've got enough damage to kind of push and kill your opponent, that's exactly what you're going to do. This deck's also really great for new players because you're going to get through a lot of games very quickly. It's aggressive, not exactly aggro because you're going for board control. But because the games are so fast, you get to see a lot of other lists, see what those matchups look like. You can kind of learn the cards, see the other decks. So definitely a good place if you're completely new to the mode. Now, if you want something that's going to take a bit more dust, a little bit more thought, you're going to have to think out your turns, I would go for this combo Druid. Now, this is a little more expensive in that it's got some epics, Force of Nature, Ancient Lore. I've included some legendaries here, so Ragnaros, Cairn, Sylvanas. These are not necessary though. If you're new, you could put in another Sen'jin. Ancient of War is another good substitute. You can even go for a more token route that has Violet Teachers instead of stuff like this. A few more small things, some Argent Squires. Very affordable if you kind of cut those. But the main piece, what you really need, what you're going for, is this Force of Nature Savage Roar combo. That on an empty board is able to deal 14 damage. So the whole game, you're going to be trying to build up your mana through Wild Growth, innervate on the turns that you have it, put out some big, hard to deal with minions, and then once you've kind of beat them up a little bit, got them down, maybe secured a board where you can even get more value from Savage Roar, you're going to push this combo. It's very effective, it's not very difficult to pilot, and again, it's another list that is played a lot at all levels of play. Now I'm going to show one that's maybe a little more controversial. Let's say you're new to the mode, maybe you played back in the day, you got tons of dust, or you've got all the cards already. It's Control Warrior. Now, controversial because this is expensive. This is not a list where you can afford to cut, all these legendaries. A couple, sure, you could go without a Harrison, you could go without a Sylvanas, something like that. But you pretty much need Alex and Grom, and then lots of other expensive cards like Shield Slam, Gorehell, those kinds of things. But the reason why I want to put this out there, maybe it's not your first deck, but if you want to take the mode seriously and you're kind of new to it, you've got these cards available. Control Warrior has almost no bad matchups, so you're going to be able to see every kind of deck, every list, feel like you've got a real chance in it. The games go longer, so you're going to have an opportunity to make lots of decisions, and really you're just going to get a good feel for what Classic is. Plus it's a control option, whereas the other two, you got a combo and aggro. This is probably the best control deck to actually learn the mode, learn the game, but I know it's not all that affordable for everyone. Now the play style of this, right, you're going to have some early drops, things like the Armorsmith, Fiery War Axe. Use Slam as removal, but it's got really cheap removal in terms of Shield Slam and Execute. So you're able to remove these big minions on the same turn that you're able to plop down something pretty big yourself. Maybe a Cairn, a Drake, a Sunwalker, something like that. You're going to get a lot of value out of those late game minions. You can even catch up with Brawl if they've extended onto the board. It's a great way to wipe lots of stuff. But basically you want to get into these big guys. You're going to get tons of value out of them. And if you're in this place versus like an aggro list or something that's trying to play a lot faster, you're probably in a good position. And against control, it's just going to be about using these things more effectively than your opponent. Now there's tons of viable decks. Those are 3 from very cheap to very expensive that you can do. I highly encourage just go and try other stuff, other classes, whatever looks cool, play around. And I know for sure a lot of people are also just going to want to build things, right? Don't follow the deck building lists that you've seen online or whatever. You don't want to pull those. You actually want to go and do the deck building yourself. So I do want to look at a few of the legendaries that I recommend crafting. And actually, Control Warrior is probably the best list to look at them for. So just across any number of decks you're going to play, if you're going to be playing control or mid-range or even combo, Cairn, Sylvanas, and Rag are like your 3 money legendaries. They're going to give you value in almost any deck, very effective, and they're neutrals, so you can play them in any class, right? It's great. Now, it's not necessarily going to be that good if you like playing aggro, so I would give an honorable mention to Alexstrasza, which is good against, or good in control lists rather, but it's not every control list. Almost every control list you'll see these 3 or a lot of them, and Alex sometimes fits. Now if you're looking for something a little bit more combo oriented or you like the aggressive decks, Leroy Jenkins, insanely good. It's played in lots of high level decks as well. It's another neutral. But that's going to kind of depend on your playstyle. Now, after that, after you've crafted those or you've kind of got an idea of where you're going to go, I don't think there's really anything that's super obvious that you have to get. I think at that point, just look at the classes, look at the cards, the decks that you've seen, and go for things you want. Maybe you get class legendaries like a Grom if you really want to play Control Warrior, an Antonidas and Mage, something like that. Or you could go for some more neutrals that are pretty good across the board, like Harrison, right? Something that you'll see in a lot of lists, but it's not necessarily an auto-include. So, okay, those are the cards to craft in general if you want to play around, you want to go across things. But what if you don't want to play these 3 lists that I've mentioned? You're going to start building stuff. Maybe you just want to have fun. Maybe you want to build something competitive. Maybe you are pulling decks that you've seen online and you want to tweak them or get an idea for how good they're going to be because everybody says their deck is the best, that kind of thing. I want to give you some deck building tips. I'm going to save you a lot of time. Basically, when you're building a deck, there's 3 decks you've got to keep in mind, and 2 of them we've already looked at. So Zoo's the first one you've got to keep in mind. It's all over ladder, right? It's got cards coming out very quickly. It's fighting for board control. So what you need is tools to deal with this kind of early aggression. You saw there's some of that removal in that Control Warrior list, but if you want to look at kind of neutral ways to remove things, Wild Pyromancer, very good. You'll see this in lots of control lists. Paladin will run it, Priest will run it, even Hunter if you want to go control oriented. It's a great neutral card for sweeping the board, super effective against Zoo, and as well, Doomsayer, super effective. You can drop it when there's 1 or 2 things on the board, or you can even preemptively drop it if you think that they're going to drop some minions. It kind of turns the initiative back to you. Again, a great way to fight against an early board control deck. Most classes also have a lot of spells that do AoE removal, so of course that's going to be super effective too, but depending on the class, you're probably going to have to start looking at neutrals that are going to help. Second one, again, we took a look at Combo Druid. The big number, 14. You want to stay above 14 health, potentially more if they've got stuff on the board. But it plays a bit different. The way that you want your deck to be built to make sure that you can counter Druid. For one, you can do tech things like the Black Knight. There's a decent amount of taunts a lot of times, In this, couple Druids of the Claw. If they do put in Ancient of War, you might get some value there. But really single target removal. So Execute and Shield Slam and Warrior, Hex in a Shaman, Polymorph in Mage, Deadly Shot and Hunter, all those kinds of things. It's going to be cheaper than the minion that they're playing. Usually you can play it and then play something on the same turn. Even if it's something as simple as like a Freezing Trap, which is just going to pick the card back up into their hand, it's going to be a great way to, again, grab initiative. You know, now they're on their back foot. They're trying to fight for the board. And then hopefully if it's later in the game or whatever, you're able to kind of secure it and keep them from dealing that combo damage. So that's the second deck you've got to keep in mind. And the third is Miracle Rogue. So this is played at all levels, but you'll see it more at high levels of play. It's got a very high skill cap, which is why I don't recommend it for new players, even though this is probably the best deck in the game. I don't think there's many people arguing that. It's going to look mostly like this. I've seen a number of variations. You know, 2 Farseers, very common, 2 Saps, very common a lot of times. But what you need to know is this is a combo deck. Leroy Jenkins' Double Shadow Step is 18 damage for 8 mana, and sometimes they can even combo that with like an Eviscerate, 1 or 2 Cold Bloods. If they've got Prep, they can do even more. Really, really crazy. But how do they get this combo? Well, they get it by playing out the Gadget Sand Auctioneer, having tons of spells that are going to allow them to draw, and they're cheap spells. But what makes it super annoying is this Conceal. If they play Gadget Sand and they conceal it on the same turn, you're not going to be able to target it. So you want to think in your deck, I'm going to be playing against Gadget Sands that are concealed a lot. What can I do to deal with that? So there's certain cards that aren't targetable that are good removal. So Deadly Shot in Hunter is a really good one. Brawl in Warrior, another really good one. But one neutral card, if you're really not sure how else to deal with it, is this Tink Master. If there's only one thing on the board, it's just a concealed Gadget Sand, and usually they're going to be playing it around that 5 or 6 mana. You can guarantee that you're going to hit it. Even if it turns into a 5/5 Devilsaur, it's going to be worth it in the long run. Another way to do that is set up taunts and hope that they don't get sapped, but I think that's going to be your best neutral tool to deal with things. So if you're building a deck, you can deal with that early aggression with stuff like Wild Pyromancer, spells, Doomsayers. Maybe you got one Tink Master in there as a way to thwart Miracle Rogue from pulling off their giant combo. And then put in a couple pieces of single target removal that are going to be as cheap as you can get in the class. That'll do you good against Druid. And you can make little tweaks here and there depending on what matchups you're struggling with. Now, of course, there's tons more decks than just that. You're going to be facing other stuff, you know, paladins and priests and all that kind of stuff. But if you can focus on those main 3, the other ones I think will be just fine. They'll come along. Your win rate overall is going to be good. So that's just kind of the basics to get you started in Classic. Beyond that, you know, there's a community of people who are extremely smart. They've played a lot. You know, if you hop into the Discord, that kind of thing, with any questions, they're going to be able to guide you on whatever kind of thing you want to make, from fun to competitive. So get out there, give it a go as a beginner, and hopefully these tips help.